Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Nakku Aidah. I'm a climate activist from Uganda, previously part of the Rise Up movement, and now working with Agape Earth Coalition in Uganda. Very passionate about women and gender in climate and the just transition. Thank you so much for having me. Today, I'll be talking about the East African crude oil pipeline and the Stop EACOP movement as a resistance to this pipeline in my country. If someone, Edo, would you share the interactive map in the background? That would be great.
Okay, I share the map.
Thank you. So I'll talk about the map after the speech, but it can be there as people are looking at it. So the East African crude oil pipeline, it's a project that is irrevocably reshaping lives in local communities, forcing them to give up the lives they once knew. So as you can see on the shared screen, a map stretching from the western part of Uganda through northern Tanzania. It's a 1,443-kilometer route that carries with it promises of oil wealth, but more darkly, shadows of destruction. This is not a hopeful vision. This is a disaster in the making. The EACOP, which is the short form of the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, it is being constructed in parallel with two upstream development projects, which are not part of the EACOP development and investment, but they are known as the Tilinga and Kingfisher, respectively. They will be the ones that have the central processing facilities, and the treated oil from these facilities will then be transported to the starting point of EACOP, which is the Kabale region, and then through the EACOP line up to the Tanga port. The shareholders of this project are majorly Total, which is a French-owned company, holding over 62% of the project shares. Then we have the two Ugandan companies, which is the Ugandan National Oil Corporation and the TBTC, which only holds about 15% each. Then the Chinese-owned company, CNOOC, which owns about 8%. The East African Crude Oil Pipeline, it starts in the Kabale region in Hoima district, which is the western part of the country, winding through sensitive ecosystems. For example, the Makshan Falls, which is a major tourist destination and a home to endangered species of the giraffes called the Rothschild giraffe. It also passes through Bugoma Forest Reserve, which is a home to the endangered chimpanzee East African species, and also the Lake Victoria Basin, which is a major source of livelihood for Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And Tanzania, as shown on the map, that's the Lake Victoria, among others. It also passes through farmlands, passes through villages, ending up at the Tanga port. This pipeline will not only transport oil, it transports risks. For example, the increased risk of spills in major water bodies like the Lake Victoria loss, and this is around people having their livelihoods like fishing, erosion of cultural values, which basically means families have to leave their ancestral lands that hold deep cultural significance and sacred sites such as burial grounds. It also carries the risk of ecosystem collapse since it passes through reserves and protected areas, and climate injustice. Over 100,000, over 118,000 people have been displaced or severely affected by the construction of EACOP. One sad story from this reality is from one Solomon Ataire, who's a Ugandan man. He had been living in his village in Kiani in the western part of the country on a land passed down by his late father. And he describes what happened to his village in 2021. In the morning at 6 a.m., the village was swarmed with over 30 to 40 military personnel. The soldiers declared that we don't want you here. People tried to protest. That's how the UPDF, which is the Ugandan army, started to shoot. Some shots were fired in the air and others aimed to scare. the villagers began to flee, and he immediately entered his house, told his wife that we have to leave. He closed his house and his shop and left directly. The reality is that this is not a distant threat. It's an active project already underway, with the latest report showing that the pipeline is 60% complete as of May 2025. This is public information with specific facts showing the project is moving rapidly and the window for effective intervention is closing. The resistance to stop EACOP. So history has shown us that projects of a scale as large as EACOP do not go unchallenged. Campaigns have been and are still active at both the local and the international levels. So at the local level, which is like in Uganda and Tanzania, the coalition known as Stop EACOP Coalition is active in Uganda and in Tanzania. It mobilizes campaigns against the pipeline on climate, human rights, and environmental grounds. The campaign stretches from social media mobilization on Twitter, on X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram, and on a website called Stop EACOP, dedicated to sharing updates and realities of this disaster, to direct advocacy and litigation. In the light of litigation, 4 NGOs have taken legal action in the East African Court of Justice in Kigali, urging the project violates treaty obligations and the rights of affected communities. Then we also have public campaigns, for example, in front of major government buildings like the Parliament of Uganda, bringing the focus to the Rise Up movement in Uganda, led by Vanessa Nakate. It has had major campaigns around EACOP. So in 2022, a few members of the Rise Up movement, they took a picture in front of the Stanbic Bank in Uganda, which is a subsidiary of Standard Bank, which is one of the major financiers of this project. It was later followed up with a number of threats from the leaders of the bank, and they also stated that they were not aware that their bosses were funding this project. Also in 2022, the Rise Up movement, some members traveled to Europe, and the aim of this travel was to meet with some major funders of this pipeline to bring the faces to the realities of this pipeline. So they were successfully able to meet the CEO of Deutsche Bank in Germany and told him the stories and the dark realities of the pipeline. Fortunately, later, it was announced that the Deutsche Bank was pulling out of the East African crude oil pipeline. It's important to note that the Deutsche Bank provided over $1.7 billion for this project between 2016 and 2020. So Deutsche Bank pulling out was a win. So with pressure from different movements from the Fridays for Future, other banks and insurance companies have also pulled out from financing this project. Examples of banks that have pulled out is UniCredit Italy, JP Morgan Chase United States, Intesa Sanpaolo Italy, among others. So due to campaigns on ground, the project timeline has been pushed back and cut off much of its international financing. The construction of the pipeline was slowed down, but it's still ongoing. So there is need for more international pressure. The realities of the construction of this pipeline also gained international attention from different groups, organizations, activists around the world, and the Fridays for Future have been able to support our local campaigns through participating online in campaigns against EACOP, mobilizing funds to support local campaigns and people who have been affected, arranging and attending the meetings with some people from the companies and that are funding EACOP and organizing protests in front of buildings of these organizations still funding EACOP. For example, in 2023, when I attended the Bonn Climate Change Conference, Fridays for Future Bonn was able to organize a protest, and organizing a protest is making sure the police is aware, bringing all the materials and helping us to map out a route up and led us up to the Deutsche Bank branch in Bonn. And here we were able to all hold a protest and call them out for funding our destruction. Over 160 non-governmental organizations on the international scene are campaigning against EACOP. A very good example is 350, which has put a lot of pressure through litigation, financial pressure, and grassroots projects. And because of this pressure, it has helped to delay the project for around 4 years now. So despite all these campaigns and banks pulling out, it has come to our attention recently that the banks that have pulled out of funding the pipeline are now buying bonds in total. So this means that they are indirectly funding the pipeline. So the pipeline was previously supposed to cost $1.4 billion, but with the delays, it now is going to cost $5.6 billion. Some of the banks that underwrote total bonds this year include Citigroup, which had pulled out, Joe Morgan Chase, then Dodger Bank again, and then MUFG Bank, among others. So they are definitely exposing themselves to the risk of the EACOP pipeline, which they showed that they are not willing to fund the destruction of the environment and the people. So now going back to the map, could you switch off all the toggles and we start afresh? Here on Explorer, just this side on the key, can I say? Could you turn this off first? So these are some of the realities of the construction of the EACOP pipeline, but I wanted to show you from the oil pads and the Tilinga. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share my screen, and I don't think the person is understanding. Could you switch off? Could you just zoom in again, please? Then could you switch off that logo for EACOP pipeline oil here on the little key?
Sorry, Aidah, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so you see here where there's Explore, the little key here, yes. Could you first switch this off this side? No, here. The little key where there's colors red, maroon, yellow, black. Not on the map here. That's the left side on the white. Here where there's EACOP, oil pad, processing facilities, oil exploration. Yes. Could we switch them off and we turn on one by one as I explained? Turn them off. Yeah. Just turn them off on them. Yes. So this is the East African crude oil pipeline, the red line. So it shows the starting point, which is the Valley in Hoima district. So that's the starting point of EACOP. Yeah. Then you can show the picture. Then the oil well pads. You can switch on the oil well pads now. The oil well pads. Could you first switch it on here? Just below here. Could you switch on the toggle for oil well pads? The little white thing on the left side of the screen, or right side for your case, I think.
Aidah.
Yes, could you turn on the toggle for oil well pad, please? Just below, yes, yeah, okay. Oil well pad, yeah. So the East African crude oil pipeline has a starting point, but oil will be processed from the two spots of Kingfisher and Tilinga. So this map is now showing the areas with the oil pads, which are just basically grounds where the equipment will be kept, and like it's leveled ground where the equipment will be kept for the oil to be refined before it's transported. Yeah. Then the processing facility. Each of these two, the Tilinga and the Kingfisher, will both have processing facilities, and these processing facilities will be the ones that first process the oil and separate it from all its impurities, and then the oil will be transported to the central line of the EACOP and then to Tanga port in Tanzania. Then the oil exploration zone is where we're getting the oil from to bring it to be processed in Tilinga and Kingfisher. So the oil processes, zoom in, yeah, there are quite many, and they're all around Crucial Lake Albert. Yeah, these are all the yellow ones are all oil exploration zones. Oh, no, not in DC, not in Congo, but just here in Uganda. So all along, these are all the areas where we shall be getting, where they are getting the oil, or we'll get the oil when the pipeline is completed. And then from there, it goes to the Tilinga and Kingfisher, then to the pipeline. But of course, there's protected zones. These protected zones include forests, they include the Makshon Falls, they include lakes, they include major rivers. And despite the fact that when they agreed on the East African crude oil pipelines construction, there was an assessment on the environmental impact and how to better preserve these areas. It's still absurd that when it comes, like for example, the Tilinga, most of the oil well pads are actually in the Makshon Falls and near the Makshon Falls, which is not good for the wildlife that lives within there. Could you zoom in and just show a picture of the Makshon Falls around the Tilinga region? It's the one up, yeah, up this side, yeah, in the protected zone, where you see the green area. Yes, Makshon Falls. Okay, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to see a picture of that today, but I'm going to share the link to this map, and in your free time, you can definitely take a closer look at all the pictures and see the faces of the people that have been affected by this pipeline. The last logo shows the number of people that have been evicted. Of course, along this whole line of where the pipeline is being constructed all the way up to Tanzania, people can't live in these areas. So for my country in particular, people have been evicted, and there have been claims that they've been evicted before compensation or without even any compensation. Yeah. So in conclusion, the map showing is not just lines and icons. It represents lives. It represents land, water, and our futures. The pipeline is not inevitable, but it's buildable. Yes, but it's still contestable. Remember that it's only 60% complete. The 40% that remains is our window. The risks are real: climate, environmental, social, economic, and political. The campaign is real: youth-led, local community-led, international networks, pressure financials, and legal action. So the choice is definitely ours to either watch or act, to resist or let this unfold unchecked. Thank you.